I'm Nikki Cruz from Awards Radar.
Hi, nice to see you. Leslie.
Yes, I've known you, Leslie, from Popular.
Oh my God, how crazy. I just saw Ryan Murphy um last week at the Chateau Marmont. He was walking through. It was really nice to see him. It was really kind of like a great full circle
Those
moment.
early Ryan Murphy days. You
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
them?
Nice place to start.
You've done a bunch of things. You've done like big blockbuster comedies, critically acclaimed television shows, everything. And I'm wondering, what makes you say yes to a project?
I don't know. I think it's pretty instinctive, right? Like I find if you say yes to something that your gut is like, you feel like you're trying to like, I just need to do like it, you should do this, even like if everyone's like, oh, it seems right on all these things, but like you just can't, it feels like you're pushing a circle into a square or something. I feel like it's ends up being not, you don't end up serving the piece and the piece doesn't end up serving you or the experience doesn't. So it's pretty instinctual when I read something. If if something ignites some curiosity in my brain goes, huh, I wonder why she did that. Oh, I wonder why. And if I start thinking that instead of why did the writer do that, that's a big thing. Because if I start to make her a she, if like I start to create ownership of it, I can tell there's something. And sometimes I'll get very curious about something and have that, but then the pieces just don't fall into place. Something like this little indie movie just came through, and I love the director, and we were having all these like very productive conversations. It just felt like they were just trying. We needed more time,
Mm.
and they didn't have it. And so just because they were like cramming, and then I was like, oh, I have to let this go because if I show up, I'll always it I won't be at, because once you get to work, you have to be able to then put it aside and then let a new version of curiosity and questioning and research take over that is sort of pre-homework, that you're doing before. So I was like, and then that feeling came up where I felt like I was trying to push a circle, like, oh, it's almost right. It's almost right. But that was a hard one because I could see the seeds of something really cool. But I was like, I'm not going to serve the piece, and I'm not going to do my job very well for that director because it's hard. It's a hard. I always look at directors and like what Mike White did. I don't know how he did that because it's not just directing. It's he wrote all of it,
Right.
and everyone's on him about everything. He doesn't really delegate anything with the writing, never. And he's pretty clear with what he wants directing wise, but like, and the look of stuff. But I did see him like some production stuff. He would, he's got really strong producers and Mark Kamine and Dave Burnett. So they're a great trifecta, those three together.
I mean, he has such a distinctive voice. And I was wondering, what was your first reaction when you were reading that script?
God, I hope I get well. Just from the sides, I was like, God, I want this show because you read the sides, and then you have to commit to the show without reading the scripts. So you're saying, so I really committed to Mike because and the show that I had seen, and this scene. It was the dinner table scene. We talk about politics in church, and I I was like, oh, he likes to push the boundaries and the edges, and then I read it, so I said yes, and then I was like, the whole show sort of blew me away. Also, because I thought it was really hard to do what he did, which is talk about spirituality
Mm.
and try to, it's such a sort of high concept in a way, you know, because it's not like how to take this sort of big idea and pull it down and make it something you can hold and digest and process in a way that's, you know what I mean? I just think sometimes it's so big and I don't know. He just made it so sort of not black and white, but like he's such a great writer that he makes it, he's so succinct when he's describing everything, even when it's not succinct. You know, I always say with Mike, it's like 9 times out of 10, it's what you're not saying is what you're really saying. Um, when I had my meeting with him, he said something really interesting to me, which I thought was pretty helpful. Um, we talked about Kate's perfectionism, which was always sort of my takeoff point with her. And my foundation for her of that perfectionism and then I just had to answer why she the why of it all and constantly asking the why and and it would be happening in real time, which is so fun, you know, things decision, you know, I do a lot of my homework before, but then it was so exciting to have these revelations within the scene that would then change like the trajectory of something that was happening, you know, that was going to happen or how I approached it. But the other thing Mike said to me, he said, you know, Kate's arc is slight, which isn't really what you want to hear. uh, it's funny because it's her whole thing of like, I'm memorable, you know, something slight. I don't want to be slight, which is so funny that that's what he said. But he said, but if we do our job correctly, it will be very impactful.
Mm.
And I was really grateful he said that because it made me queue up in a big way. You should always have your listening queued up, but it really queued up my listening. It really made me hyper vigilant to never put down my pencil or my thinking cap with her, to never rest in a moment. It kept me very on the balls of my feet within a scene to see what was happening and how that was affecting her. Because I think so much of her is seen through her watching other people
Mm.
and her processing other people and how to respond to them. Like it's happening in real time with her, and she's not somebody, she doesn't sort of wear her heart on her sleeve. I mean, she's a wonderful friend and she's got her foibles, but I love her. I think she cares a lot.
Yeah.
I think she's incredibly insecure. I think she's a very good friend. Which you would say, well, why does she talk so much shit? But that's just because when she's with one person, she's trying to connect so desperately. So I don't think she thinks she's talking shit about them. I think she's like, I'm connecting with her.
Correct.
So it might be at the expense of Jacqueline or Lori, but in that moment, and you know, and usually her talking about others is under the guise of caring.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy that she's like Switzerland in a way. She just wants her friends to be happy.
Wants her friends to be happy and wants them to like her desperately. And like, it was a funny thing, like this great, I gonna sound like a broken record, but this thing that I thought was so fun that happened. And I, I just never had it this way exactly. And I really credit Mike and the way he shoots and the way how his writing is like an onion, that you're always peeling back the layers, that it's always like this sense of discovery that's happening in the moment with it. That in the script we were all sort of supposed to be so sort of like, ooh, Valentin, you know, ooh, he's the good looking, you know, butler. So we did the ladies villa was the first one we shot, And I remember we were doing the first scene of us walking into the villa, and I was like perched in a chair, and it was so funny because the way I was perched, I later was thinking about it, and I was like, oh yeah, she's always like a little bird watching everybody. But I was sitting there watching Jacqueline and Lori talk about Valentin, and I remember the feeling, and I got like, as Kate, I was like, oh, Kate's jealous because they're gonna and like it was like suddenly I realized like they're back and forth. I was like, oh, that's the dynamic that they've had ever since. They've always been competitive. And then it made me go back and was like, oh yeah, when we're at the restaurant, they were the cheerleaders or they were the dancers and I played softball. And like there was this thing of the two of them and me on the outskirts. And so when they started talking about Valentin, I remember being struck with he's gonna ruin our vacation. And so I changed something that every time he came to our table or whatever he did, this poor actor probably thinks I hate, but every time he came, I was like, because it wasn't what was in the script, but it was this thing that happened that I just sort of, I wanted Kate to be allergic to him. And because I knew they were going to ruin, there was a chance he was going to ruin everything. And then, of course, he brings those Russians back to our house, and
Yeah.
so it was so. But like that, I think that just happens so much with Mike, and when you're shooting, and if the way he comes over and he's working in real time, and he sees the scene that he's written, he sees the rehearsal, and then he comes back over and he's playing something out, and it's always moving. So this will change sometimes. You're like, wait, but will that match with that coverage of whatever? But he knows exactly because it's all being molded in real time. It's not like, sometimes you hear like Sorkin's like, this is what it is.
Sure.
This is it. And you imagine it doesn't change on the day at all. And not that big things were happening, but sometimes Mike would come over and it's like this, and he's got great thoughts, and Patrick Schwarzenegger told this story, and I thought, oh, this is the exactly why Mike is such a great director. Because as actors, you read something and you're like, oh, I got to make something out of this, and I've got to have a great arc, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do this. And Patrick said something like, it was like sort of the end of his storyline. And he was like, did something and had this books and all this stuff. And Mike was like, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, well, it's the end. And, I feel like I need to feel like my character has changed because of her. And he goes, you've been here for 6 days. How much are you going to change? And I thought it was so fun. I was like, yeah, he's right. You've been here for 6 days. It's not like you've been on at a health retreat for 6 days. You've just been at a very like luxe, hotel for 6 days. You're not going to have these crazy, like, oh, I'm a different person. But I think that's, Mike is so clever in that way of like, he's able to always, you're never going to be let down with him ever as an artist, ever.
I really do appreciate too, like the dynamic between these three women. Like they resonate so much. So I feel like everyone has a girl group, and they can assign like, oh, she's a Lori, she's a Kate, and she's a Jacqueline. Did you know a Kate in your life? Do you recognize a Kate within yourself, or?
I mean, of course, I recognize a Kate in myself. I mean, I think Mike is very good at casting, and he sees something. I mean, I'm a perfectionist, and when he said to me, he was like, "You're a perfectionist," I was like, "No, I'm not." And then cut to, I'm totally a perfectionist. And he made me do an Enneagram test when we were on our meeting, and I was like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah, you're going to be like an 843 or whatever the number was, but an 8, I think, is a perfectionist." And I was like, "No, I'm not." I answered. He was like, get off the Zoom and call me back." And then I was a complete 8. And I was like, dang it. Um, but yeah, I think I do recognize my own insecurities and my own perfectionism. And I do think what I've taken from this experience is I realize how important vulnerability is. I mean, in a way that's like very profound for me, that like I've sort of changed friendships a bit because there was a friend I used to have, and we were always like, it's us against the world. I'm pushing a rock up ahead. And I was like, oh, what if there's enough room for it to be about vulnerability and about softness instead of like, here's my hard front. This is what I've got to do. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's way more interesting to watch somebody who's vulnerable and figuring something out, and all of that vulnerability, all the things that we want to, that maybe might not be our strongest part of ourselves, are way more interesting to try to lead with. And I found that I've started to really do that, and it's been scary because I seem like an extrovert, but I'm really an introvert masking, presenting as an extrovert. And I've really been trying to sort of go outside of like my own version of a Kate bubble and be like, because I felt like there was something actually about Frank's monologue when I read it, when I read the show originally, that hit me, Leslie, deeply. And then I felt really informed Kate in a way, because it all felt about vulnerability. And that felt like the thing that Kate was scared to show the most, like, because she's so like, this is my life and my life's great and I'm happy and I'm doing this and I'm that. And it's, but I was like, is she is just always the thing that kept coming up. Is she? And there's probably room that she is, but for me as an actor, it's way more interesting to be if she's fronting, and that if she's not, if there are some cracks in that armor. So I thought, gosh, if she just sort of come in and led with any of her own vulnerability, or if Lori had led with her vulnerability, or if Jacqueline had led with vulnerable, to be vulnerable and say, this is what I feel insecure about, or this is what's happening right now, or this is what's just pissing me off, or this, instead of trying to keep it secret and be like, I'm just going to whisper over here. Like, that there's room enough to just speak our truth and live in that unapologetically. And so that's what I thought was so cool about Frank's monologue, is that it felt so brave to sort of be so honest about his truth.
Yeah.
And it felt so vulnerable. Because you could sort of get distracted with like, oh, this is again in Mike fashion. This is what it's about. He's talking about sex, and he's talking about, oh, okay, maybe he's talking about spirit versus form, and there's spiritual, but there's all this depth. And it's so like the vulnerability and the an unapologetic way he's speaking his truth, and foibled, right? Like, that's, I mean, nothing's black and white with Mike.
And then the internet just takes that speech and just turns it into something else with the memes and all of that stuff.
I know, right? I mean, that show, they love him. I mean, I do love that though, that how invested the audience is with the show. I mean, I think it's a testament to the way that Mike writes and the way that he elevates it to say, no, they can handle it. No, I find sometimes with television that they dumb it down somehow. Like, no, we've got to remind them, or we're trying to sell toilet paper, or we can't be this provocative. And it's the cool thing about HBO, and it's the cool thing with streamers. But I feel like, HBO was kind of doing it first, right? And that they go, no, 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 they can. But Mike really does go, I'm not going to put bows on anything. I'm not going to give you a happy ending. I'm not going to, someone's going to die. You're going to see people not make the right choice. You're going to see people not be their best selves. And you're going to see yourself in that, in the privacy of your own home. And it's going to make you think. And, and I'm only going to give you one a week. And you gotta marinate in that. And I just thought that I see it like when I've never been on a show where people are this, they're just so dedicated and invested in a way that it's not just because it's like water coolers. It's just like they really see themselves in all the characters.
Yeah.
They're a lawyer, they're a Kate, or they're a Saxon, or they're a Victoria, they're they're a Belinda. They're just always seeing, and I it's that cue, that thing that Mike is able to do where he can, and because I think there's something cool in the fact that because he pushes the boundaries so much and the edges, that it makes people go, oh, it's okay that I'm not fitting into this box, that it's kind of quirky and because that's the thing, like we all wanted to have a bow on it and be so we
Right.
couldn't understand it, and life is fucking hard and we can't understand it, and some days I do understand things, and then the next day my ego shows up, or my insecurity shows up, or my imposter syndrome shows up, and I fall flat. And I think it's so cool, like what Mike does over whatever it is, 8 weeks over the course of this 6-day trip, and on the ride he takes you on emotionally.
What kind of feedback have you received from fans saying like, oh, maybe like this character resonated with me or
Yeah, I think what I got is it was interesting. It went from, oh, those girls are such gossips. Oh, Kate's a real shit stirrer. You voted for Trump?
what a journey.
To when I think something happened when she heard her friends talking about her.
Mm.
And I remember I really did like a good emotional prep for that. It's just, it seems like a thing. You just walk out, you hear them. But it felt like such a betrayal. Like it felt like you saw her heartbreak and all the feelings of not being enough. And when I read it, it always hit me deeply because I think we've all had that happen. I mean, haven't you ever had like heard somebody where you sort of feel like, oh, I'm not enough. I'm not, I'm not enough. And I think like that to the something about me at the thing and putting on my pajamas and how awkward she was dancing at that club and me putting on the pajamas, it sort of shifted like, oh, Kate, to suddenly people were like, oh no, I'm a Kate. Oh, I get that. Because I think what it is that we're complicated people, and like you might not see yourself totally, but there might be things where like, oh, I don't know if I align with her there, but then you start to, as the show goes and you start to really see, as you pull back the layers, you start to see her insecurity, and you start to see like, oh, maybe she's doing that for that reason. Oh my God, she's actually a really good friend. And oh God, she just talks incessantly because she doesn't know how not just to be silent and sit in her own power, because all she has is she has her kids. And I just was always struck with this, not that just being her kids, but the fact that like you married this guy out of college. She sort of gave up her dreams. And I know people go, oh, she's living the high life. But I think deeply that when you are a woman and you sit there and go, I'm okay, this is your dream. I'm going to be in it with you. I'm going to hold down the home. I'm going to hold down the fort. I'm going to have the kids. I'm going to be the wind beneath your wings. And then he makes it big and he sells it big. And then suddenly you're like, what if he just changes his mind?
Hmm.
And it, for me, always felt like shaky ground. I mean, my dad died when I was 3, and I remember my mom always saying, and maybe this is, and I remember that just sort of, I put a little, I wanted it a little bit into Kate, but my mom's like, you should never depend on a man. You never know what's going to happen. And she was talking about death, but it really sat with me as a young. I mean, my mom probably said too young, but
That stuff sticks with you.
it really did. I mean, it made me like always I always had a bank account. I always was like, you can't. And I just remember when I was working on Kate, I heard that in my head a lot. And so I felt like, okay, maybe that's something with her. Maybe that's something with her. Because it's a great life and she loves it. And I also felt like who she was there, like the wardrobe is very very low V's, and Mike was like, good God. And I was like, no, but she bought a whole new wardrobe for this trip. This trip is very, and like who she is when she arrives and who she is when she leaves are sort of the girl that lives in Austin, Texas. But who she is there is I see somebody trying to remember like that fearless girl she was in high school with her 2 best friends, and trying to feel like she's cool and with it. And again, it leads back to like I feel like her insecurity and her sense of not being enough. I don't know. I found that very interesting and something that I think I connected with, but I do think people connect with. I think they started to see that what maybe was slight, what Mike said, what was slight, if we do it right, will be very impactful. And I think we did it.
Also, it just goes to show you, like all the prep work, it's just so important. And as a viewer watching it, I got a sense that these women have known each other for their whole lives. Um, what was it like creating that with Carrie and Michelle?
We again, like we were the first ones to shoot. So we met in person 4 days before we started filming. So it's not a lot of prep time. And we knew the history we would have to have. And so part of it is luck that it's just there. We started a text thread in the beginning where we started sharing all these childhood photos of ourselves. And that was really helpful. And we all sort of aligned with, okay, where did we grow up? How old were we when we met? So that our backstory felt similar, so that we all had this same sort of pool we were swimming in. Um, and I think who we are as as workers, as like actors on a set, or we have a very strong work ethic. We all sort of, not that we work the same, but we all come very prepared and ready to play. And also I think the fact that we live together. So like I lived with Carrie, and then Michelle and Parker Posey lived in the villa right below us. So we spent time. There's something if like you wake up and someone's sitting in your living room and you're having coffee in the morning, it like the
Yes.
learning curve of it just sort of was amplified. So I think I think part of it was luck. And we did our job in trying to create a good foundation, but it just happened. That's the thing with chemistry. You just never know if it's gonna like work or not. And then when I see them, I'm like, yeah, it just was there. It was just like it just was there. And it just kept growing over time too, as we were there longer and longer with each other.
Before we wrap, I'm wondering, Kate, if you can choose a character from season one or two for Kate to like come into contact with, who would that be?
Well, I feel like Connie Britton's character could be at Claire Popovich's baby shower too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Laura Dern's voice, the voice coming over the phone to Michael Imperioli's character. That would be nice. I would like to interface. Yeah, that was always sort of like Laura Dern was very, just hearing that voice on the other line was very interesting to me
Yeah.
and always very haunting. So maybe that voice. Who's that girl? Who's that woman?
I hope we meet her eventually.
Yeah, you might. You know, that's a good history that I feel like Mike White will definitely showed him, or not definitely, but it feels like with him, he loves to have a sense of history with people. He keeps like a troop, right?
Well, Leslie, thank you so much. I could listen to you talk about your craft all day long, but unfortunately,
I
we have
always feel like I sound like such an asshole when I say it. Like it sounds so haughty. Like, okay, relax, relax, Rada. You didn't,
you're not
you did, relax.
you're
But
not feeding me lines though. Like that's the stuff I need, you know? That's the stuff I like. So I
yeah, I
appreciate
love it. I love what I do, but I really love Kate. I love I love her. I think like she is somebody who could be so dismissed so easily.
it.
So trying to find a way for her to be memorable was it just broke my heart when she said, I'm memorable, right? Like, you know, she's always listening. And as a baby of three older sisters, that always I think informed a lot for me for Kate, because it always felt like she just wants to be loved.
Mm.
So I think there's a universal theme there that people can relate to.
I certainly can as the baby of my
Yeah.
family. So
You know what I'm talking about.
I do. I do.
Yeah.
No one listens to us.
Nobody listens. I mean, I sat there at one point. I was like, how many times do do Jacqueline and Lori say, fuck off, Kate, fuck you, Kate, shut up, Kate. I went through like at one point I was sitting there doing work and I just all of a sudden I saw it in a scene and I was like, went through and I scoured my script and I was like, it was a great, I heard one time Denzel Washington say this thing, it really sat with me. He was doing not, he didn't say it to me. I saw it like he was talking about the work and the work on a character. And he said something like, and I'm probably misquoting him, but the essence of what he said is what I took from it was if you ever think the work is ever done, you haven't even started.
Mm.
I'm still thinking about Kate. I, if I'm being honest, like, because everyone's like, because I still haven't watched, I'm scared I'm going to watch it and see I missed a moment for her and I will be so heartbroken because she still sits with me in a way no character like I'm still like oh god like you should be always tilling that ground of that character. So that thing that I saw whatever came on whatever algorithm that came up of Denzel, who I think is brilliant, um saying that and I was like wow it's so interesting. He's right, you're never done. And if you think you're done, you haven't even fucking started. And you are literally never done, even when they say, that's a wrap, we're going home, the movie's over, you're watching it on the big screen. It's always because also a character, I think, tees you up for somebody else. Like there's this feeling I have about the work that is like, I couldn't have had Kate if I hadn't had the character in juror number two. And I couldn't have had the character in juror number two if I hadn't had, and like they all sort of are teeing you up. There's a part of like Carly Bobby that I think is in Christine Everhart.
Mm.
There's a cunning. There is I'll do what I have to do to get what I want under the guise of you can put it under different things. Carly's is just like, you know, Scarlett O'Hara, I'll never go hungry again. Christine Everhart's under, I'm a journalist. This is what I'm going to do. I'm doing it for the greater good. To Dinah in Palm Royale, there is that, like, I'll never go hungry again. And if that means, compartmentalizing and, telling untruths, but who's lying? Lying feels like too much of a judgment. I'm just keeping people safe from things that they don't need to hear, and that's interesting. But again, there's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of like how, you take it all forward to it all feeds, it's all feeding the work all the time, which
Well,
is so cool.
I think that's a perfect note to end on, especially Zoom is telling me I have 1 minute left. So,
Okay, goodbye, Zoom. Goodbye, Zoom.
well,
Thank
thank you
you so much.
so much for this chat. I
Hey,
hope it's not
thanks for taking time. I really appreciate it.